Hi everybody, it's Sonja
and Natasha,
and we're back once more in our program room at the North Grove. This is our last video of the Handle with Care series. It's building block number 4, and it's our 6th video. So building block number 4 says that positive relationships help children feel good about themselves and build a foundation for future social and emotional well-beings. So there's lots of things that happen when a child experiences positive relationships, and particularly with the adults and caregivers in their lives. It enriches the child's life. It helps them learn how to get along with others. So if you think about our day-to-day interactions with our children, we are teaching them and they are learning how to get along with others. It helps them to learn about compassion, cooperation, and also how to think about how others may feel about situations. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. So a strong relationship with a trusted adult means that they're likely to be able to connect better with other people. And what we know is that in the beginning, that adult-child relationship is likely the most important relationship in that child's life, be it with you or another caregiver. And as they grow older, if they've had that secure relationship with you, we see them starting to move into peer relationships. And that becomes the primary focus. You're still there, but you'll often see and feel, especially if you've experienced teenagers, that they tend to move away from you a little bit. And that's okay, because what you've done is set that foundation for them to be able to have positive relationships with other people. That being said, so those who do not have secure, trusting relationships will also, you'll see them lots of times having aggression. So showing aggression, and they will experience rejection or have problems making peer relationships. And that's not always the case, because as we know, you'll hit bumps in the road where your child is having problems with their peers, or they may be experiencing some bullying, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not experiencing positive relationships at home. However, if they don't have a secure, trusting relationship, the likelihood of these things happening to me would go up.
Yeah.
Would that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And maybe not all, most children kind of going through the school system and navigating friendships and relationships at points, will have difficulty either, fitting into a peer group, handling some friendships. That kind of stuff is definitely normal. It's when it's always happening or the most prevalent kind of that it would be more worrisome.
Yeah, for sure, because it goes back to all those wonderful things like cooperation and empathy and all those things that develop out of having that secure, positive relationship with an adult. So one thing that I noted when we were doing this was a major milestone is usually around the age of 4, when children become aware of other people's thoughts and beliefs, and they realize that they're different from their own. So a lot of times we'll say children are really egocentric and that they think about things from their own perspective. That's how they see the world, and everything is about them. And at some point you start to see a little bit of a shift. And some people say, hey, my child, I saw that before 4. And some people say, hey, I haven't seen that yet. But it's usually around the age of 4 that you'll start to see some of these things.
And it's important. So, being egocentric really can have a very negative connotation. But for children under the age of 4, it's really a good thing, because they're only concerned about themselves, and that helps them kind of move about the world, be super curious and explore and do so much learning by really kind of only worrying about themselves. So It is a good thing.
And it does serve a purpose for sure, right? However, sometimes we'll see conflicts developing because of this maybe lack of ability to see perspective from other people's point of view. So a fight, will erupt, and it can be hard to navigate some of that. So how do you help your children learn some of those skills so that they're able to have positive relationships with their peers and friends? So one of the things, and this is just something years ago, I read a book that was called You Can't Come to My Birthday Party. It was a really, really good book, and I would highly recommend it. And it talked a lot about navigating conflict between children. So this also in Handle with Care reflected a lot of what was read in that book, and I couldn't help think about it. So if you think of a conflict, when it happens, the very first thing you want to do as an adult is get to know the story and the whole story. So it's not just your child's story. You want to find out the other child's story. So if you've ever had to break up an argument or a fight between two small children, is to go in and say, hey, guys, get down on their level and say, what's going on here? And then you hear what this person has to say and this person. Because likely the stories are going to be different. Because we'll always say there's your perspective, their perspective, and then really what happened.
Yeah.
Right?
Because everybody's bringing their own lens to
For sure.
what happened. So
Yeah.
I am looking at it from my perspective as me being the most important person in this situation, and then the other child is looking at it from that exact same situation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and they're not objective, right?
Yeah.
They're subjective. So
Yeah.
you are just kind of seeing what you see, right?
Yeah.
If you could have a video above, then you could actually see really what transpired there. So it's get to know the story, and then you identify the problem. So often we'll use the example of two children fighting over a toy. So-and-so has it, and this person wants it. Okay, so that's the conflict that's happening. So we're identifying the problem. Then we're going to discuss the experience of each child, and then do some brainstorming together. And I love this one because you could say, okay, I'm going to get a piece of paper and pen, and we're going to write down some ideas of how we might solve this problem. Because our and I know I've done this in the past, what we want to do is go in and say, okay, you have the truck for 5 minutes, then you can have it when the timer goes off. Okay, that's fine if that's what they've come up with. But for me to go in and solve that problem for them and dictate how they should do it, they're not really learning anything.
No, and we know there's way more buy-in from children if they have kind of a role or a part to play or an idea about how it can be solved, because oftentimes they do, and they may be really off-the-wall examples of how they think this situation could be handled, but we can learn a lot really by listening to some of their solutions, and sometimes they're really simple. Sometimes they've changed their mind and they'll say, Sonja, you can have that toy, I don't really want it anymore. Yeah. And that's what the solution is.
And that's the solution. Yeah. And that's what I remember from the book, because sometimes they said what the children came up with in the end and determined it was how they're going to solve it was absolutely kind of ridiculous, right? Just really funny. And you're like, okay, sure. If that's what they want to do, right? Because they could say, I want them to have it, I'm going to do 1 minute, and they can have it the rest of the day. And you're like, oh, okay, sure, right? But the idea is that you give them, okay, first of all, you respect what happened, you get the sides from both people, then you kind of come up with solutions together, and then you support them in that. Because it's not enough just to say, okay, solved. See you later, good luck, right? They may need some support. So you may say, okay, so do you need me to set a timer? Would you like me to give you a reminder? So that's just a little bit around conflict resolution because you'll experience time and time again. We say with children, they give you lots of opportunity to practice. Right? Lots and lots of opportunity. After I read that book, I came back into the playroom and I practiced it every day, right? But it really made me think about how I used to do things and then how I might do things now, right?
So sometimes in those arguments or disagreements or whatever you want to call them, there could be hurt feelings and things just kind of they just don't feel right to you. You either don't feel like you handled it well, you're not happy with how it went, and sometimes there's some kind of repairing of that relationship that needs to happen. So if you were to think back to a time when your child kind of lost control or became really withdrawn, so maybe they had a temper tantrum at a grocery store, and you kind of think to yourself, what do you think your child was trying to tell you in the midst of all of that? Were they, tired or hungry or bored maybe? Were there signs of what was coming? Oftentimes there are signs, and we are too busy to see that buildup of that tantrum. And so, we don't have the opportunity to ward it off. Did they try to tell you something before it happened? So maybe they did try to say to you or give you a little bit of heads up that this was going to go sideways, and you didn't see it, or weren't paying attention enough to notice it. And then how did you react to the meltdown? So were you calm, or did you become really distressed too? So what we know is that if you are distressed and your child is distressed, it's not going to end positively for either of you. So oftentimes we get distressed when our children are distressed.
And that quote was it, you don't join in their chaos?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
There's some different quotes that I've read over the years, and I thought that's true, right? When they are upset and freaking out, they do not need us to also do that. It's like if I came to Natasha and was having a real stress day and I was just really melting down, and then Natasha melted down, then the person I went to help me,
right? Is in a puddle too.
Yeah,
yes. Yeah. And oftentimes, if you were to think back to a time that your child had a temper tantrum in that grocery store, you were often not in a place to handle it calmly because you're embarrassed and you feel everybody's watching you, and you sometimes, lose it yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
And physiologically, our body responds. Like your heart starts pounding and you start to get sweaty. So like already it's starting.
Yeah.
It's like some instinctual thing that kicks in, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So it's important for us as the adult to really kind of be in charge and try to maintain some control over what's going on. And it may mean that the adult needs to take a few breaths or walk away. So few breaths, not walk away in the grocery store, but maybe taking those few breaths and say to yourself, right, I'm just going to take a few minutes to calm myself down here. I don't care what everybody else is thinking. I think most of the people are probably thinking, if it was me watching it, I would think I've been in that same place, or I feel empathetic towards the mother and not kind of judgmental. But I think our heads kind of go to that judgment place because it's difficult to be a parent. So making sure that whichever you choose kind of in that moment, that the child is safe, and that's what's most important. Maybe the child needs some space to calm down. And it is to remember that it is always the adult's job to stay calm and to stay kind. And I think sometimes we forget that kindness because what is kind of behind the root of our distress is probably anger and some madness there. So I'm just going to read to you a little bit about repairing relationships. And this talks about repairing relationships with a time away. So not looking at it as time out, because we know that timeouts are typically more punitive and meant to punish the child. So thinking of it as a time away. So if I'm upset and my child's upset, so sometimes it's necessary to start with a time away. So for you as the parent, for the child, or maybe for both, until I as the parent can know that I am bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind, and to remind myself that no matter how I feel, that my child needs me. A time away can be helpful as a first step, and to remember, as I said, that it's not a time out, and it's not meant to punish the child. It's meant as a time away for both of you in this situation to just kind of come back to yourself and ground yourself a little bit and get your breathing back, get your mind relaxed, and get you both to a place where you're able to talk about what happened.
And I think that's a really good tool to be able to teach your child, right? Is to kind of, okay, you need a minute to regroup. And that's okay. And I found my son over the years, he used to have a lot of trouble regulating his emotions, and now he'll choose to kind of go off and do his thing. And I don't bother him because I know he needs a minute, right?
And they're not to look at it as that your child is going away from you but they're going away to kind of away for themselves, to ground themselves. This is about them, and it's a skill to know that I need to take a few minutes. And good for you as the parent to take a few minutes too. So in a situation where you as the parent are calm, or at least calm enough that you feel like you can talk to your child, but your child is still upset. So So you're going to try to think about building a safe repair routine and thinking and remembering, that this does not happen overnight, and that this is not going to be some miracle skill that you're going to learn as a parent that is going to completely change everything for you, that it could take lots and lots of practice and patience before something like this may work, and that you may see some benefits of it. So you're going to take charge so that your child is not too out of control. You can change location, go to a neutral place that is your kind of time away spot, maybe together, sit together, and over the course of that your feelings will begin to change and that you'll feel a little bit more calmness. You can maintain a calm tone of voice. You want to be firm, but you also want to be really reassuring and kind. You can do something together. Maybe read, look out the window, something again that's going to bring you together, like doing something together, still not talking about what happened, but having some calmness around you. You can help your child bring words to his or her feelings. It looks like this is really hard for you. Are you feeling mad, sad, or afraid? You can talk about your own feelings. You can stay with your child until he or she is calm enough, remembering that it might take several minutes for a child to calm down from a very kind of overwhelming or unorganized feeling. And then remember to stay in charge and stay sympathetic. So if you as the parent is calm enough and you're feeling like your child is calm enough, you would use the following supports to kind of repair or make repair easier in the future. So you would help your child use words for the needs and feelings that he or she is struggling with by listening and talking together. And it is really important to listen and not just focus on the talking. Sometimes as parents, we get really hung up in a lot of talking and don't do enough listening. So really remembering to keep it short and sweet. So you can talk too much about something and not listen enough.
Yeah. And I like that they say that you do this when you're calm and the child's calm, because when we talked previous video about flipping your lid, that is not the time to try and interject information and what they did wrong, because at that point in time, you're trying to get that lid back on, you're trying to get them to calm down. And then when you're both in a calm state, then you can kind of reflect and hopefully come up with some solutions as to kind of, what you can do next time.
Mm-hmm. And I think when you described it a little bit too, as like when that lid flips and it's like a pot, I feel like sometimes as parents, we feel like it's our job to just stuff all this knowledge in their brains, right? We're trying to tell them what they did wrong and how they should do it better and all of this information, but it's like that pot that's boiling over. Everything is going to come back out, right? They're not able to absorb anything. So those two calm minds meeting is really the solution. You want to help your child take responsibility for his or her part, and then as a parent, take responsibility for your part as well. So it's important to remember that we're not blaming here, but we're also not excusing.
Yes.
So, I think back to my parents, a phrase that was probably used often back in that day would have been like, you should have known better. And it's not to say, your child should have known better than to act that way, but for them to take some responsibility about how they did act, right? So I threw things in the store, or I was yelling, or I was running. All things that they know not to do, and you're not blaming, but we're just taking some responsibility for that.
And you do, we say with any discipline, right? It's a teaching tool. So we're not punishing our child, we're not putting them in time out. We're giving them like a time away to think about it, to calm down. But now comes the teaching part. It is they do have to learn so that they don't continue to do this forever.
Right. Yeah. And then it's a partnership too. So as a parent, I'm going to apologize and take responsibility for raising my voice or taking them to the grocery store when I knew that they were tired or hungry, and I was probably setting them up for a little bit of failure. So not excusing behaviors, but addressing the things that happened and what kind of may have been the underlying issues that made it happen. And then talk about new ways of dealing with the problem in the future. And this is really important, and Sonja alluded to it earlier in the video about, children have ideas. Children, a child may say, next time we go to the grocery store, I want to be the one to push the cart, or I want to have my own cart, or I want to hold the grocery list. So it may be something very simple that will help some of these things not happen again. So the bottom line is that together, you want your child to know that you are going to figure this out and that they're not in it alone.
This whole thing was called repairing the relationship because above all else, you want to always keep that special relationship. And it feels like it is kind of broken when you do have a disagreement with your child or your partner or anybody, important in your life. So it is to kind of think about, okay, how can we repair our relationship? How can we make sure that, you know what, maybe I didn't like some of the things you did, I didn't agree with your behavior, but I always love you and I'll always be here for you, but we have to learn a better way to manage it.
Yeah, and I love that line, I don't like what you did, but I still love you, because children can get really hung up on attaching the love of a parent or a caregiver or somebody important to how they behave or to an action that they did, right? So making sure that your children know that it doesn't matter what they've done, that you still love them, and that at the root of it, it's the behavior that's the issue and not the child, right? So it's, I don't like how you handled something, but I still love you, and let's find a better way to do that in the future. That your love isn't conditional on how they're behaving. That it's, the love is unconditional, I'll always love you, but I don't like some of the behaviors I'm seeing.
Yeah.
And let's work together, because we both have a role in this, to see if we can make some change it.
And hopefully what you'll see, because we talked about peer, but then eventually it'll be partner relationships or other adult relationships, that you want to teach them these skills because you want them to then go forward with their partners and their own children, maybe one of these days, and be able to kind of carry on some of these things that you're teaching them, right? So the summary for building block number 4 is a child's first relationship with important adults in their life is the model for the way they will relate to other people throughout their life. A positive and healthy relationship takes time, trust, and practice. And it says, when I feel connected to the important adults in my life, I can solve problems, understand how others feel, and get along with my family and friends. So take time today to think about the kind of relationship you want to have with the child in your life. Pick one quality that you want to work towards and do one thing to promote it. For example, today I will be more patient. I will take 3 calming breaths before reacting to a situation. So that is it for the Handle with Care videos. We hope you enjoyed them, and hopefully we'll get together again sometime in 2021.
We are looking forward to sharing this new program space with you all.
Take care, everybody.